From ancient times when all things were created, heaven and earth were divided into three realms, namely the celestial realm, the human realm, and the demon realm, among which the one standing at the top was undoubtedly the celestial realm, the place where the sky was filled with countless twinkling stars. Within the vast galaxy, in a grand and magnificent palace, a lonely figure stood there, whispering softly from the depths of his heart, 3,000 years have passed. He was young Kingian, unlike everyone else who longed for every possible way to reach the celestial realm. He was the complete opposite. Looking at the crack before him, Kingian silently calculated to himself, as long as I can sever this spatial rift. Right after that thought, he drew the long sword from his back and shouted loudly, I, young Kingian, am going home. It turned out that the reason why this handsome man's face looked so sorrowful was because he had been trapped in this lofty and lonely place. Swinging his sword, Kingian slashed fiercely at the rift with a burning hope. Heaven-severing sword, shatter the void. Just like that, Kingian, without hesitation and without caring for his life, charged madly forward. The tip of his sword pierced straight ahead. The crack now echoed with a loud roar as thunder began to spread all around. At last, heaven did not betray him. The thing that had imprisoned him here finally shattered under his sword. Immediately after, he and his long sword broke through the barrier separating the celestial and human realms. But just moments after he passed through, the rift instantly burst with lightning and slowly closed up. It seemed his chance of returning there was now very slim, though Kingian did not care. On the other side, the girl suddenly noticed and could not help but worry the breath of the celestial emperor. As those words left her lips, the girl whose eyes were covered by cloth could not hide a satisfied smile. Meanwhile, the white cat beside her was extremely puzzled, wondering, why can't I see him anymore? Over here, Kingian did not feel too well, for right after he crossed over, a surge of inner force struck heavily on his shoulder. He bit his teeth in pain, feeling as if his whole body was being torn apart. In this moment of haziness, memories of the past suddenly flooded his mind. It turned out that 3 years ago, Kingian had left home to train far away. But misfortune struck him that day, as he was swept into a spatial storm at Langya Mountain and ended up in the celestial realm. There, day after day, he endured endless hardships, striving diligently for 3,000 years. Heaven did not let his efforts go unrewarded, for through that perseverance, Kingian became the celestial emperor admired by all. Now, back in the present, his eyes struggled to open wide, his brows furrowing tightly together. He thrust his sword hard into the ground and exhaled a long breath. Luckily, 3,000 years in the celestial realm only equaled 3 years in the human world. Once again, Kingian gripped his sword tightly, and with disdain in his eyes, he asked himself, even if I became the celestial emperor, so what? Pausing for a moment, he then gathered all his inner power and shouted loudly, even if I must wager my 3,000 years of cultivation, I will reunite with my family. As his words fell, his sword once again slashed fiercely forward. And just like that, he shattered the void once more and returned to the mortal world. Silently, Kingian made a firm vow. Once he had lacked the strength to protect the one he loved. But now, Kingian swore that he would make the whole world kneel beneath his feet. At this moment, the scene shifted to the Tianyuan Kingdom in Tianwu City, a place of heavenly beauty surrounded by charming mountains and rivers. In front of the Yun residence, 2 guards sat lazily at their post, both wearing indifferent expressions. Nearby, 3 men from the Lin family were beating a young man at their feet while sneering, without young Kingian, the Yun family is nothing but a bunch of trash. The sight enraged the passers-by. The Lin family had grown increasingly arrogant in recent years. As the second most powerful force in Tianwu City, with the #1 prodigy Lin Y, their arrogance knew no bounds. What kind of prodigy? He's just a dog. If young Kingian hadn't gone missing, when would it ever have been Lin Y's turn to be proud? The Lin family's lackey stepped on Yun Zion's head and mocked disdainfully. Even if young Kingian returns, he'll be just like his cousin Yun Zion, stepped on by me. At that moment, a familiar figure appeared, accompanied by a curious voice. The three men looked up toward the sky, their feet still pressing down on the motionless Yun Zion lying on the ground. As soon as he appeared, he smiled faintly and asked while aiming a precise kick straight at the man's face, like this. With that, the Lin family's lackey was kicked hard in the face, his anger flaring. "You filthy beggar, where did you come from? You dare kick me? Do you want to die?" The man stared at the one who had dared to strike him, the tip of that boot still pressing against his face. Then, the familiar face appeared before his eyes. He froze in shock. "You are Yun Qingyan." Pressing down harder, Qingyan repeatedly stomped his face like a ball and replied casually, "That's right, it's me." Looking at the defeated man, he sneered and said, "I see your bones and endurance aren't bad. You could be considered a martial arts talent." As soon as he finished, Qingyan moved swiftly, vanishing from sight in an instant, and before the man could react, another heavy kick struck him square in the face, forcing blood to spurt from his mouth. The impact drove him hard against the ground, and Qingyan added coldly, "Why don't I just cripple you today?" The people on the street burst with satisfaction. "It's Yun Qingyan. Yun Qingyan has returned." 3 years ago, he was already a level 5 spiritual realm genius. Now his cultivation must be even greater than before. Let's see if the Lin family still dares to act arrogant after this. The other two men hurriedly dragged their comrade away. "Yun Qingyan, don't think the Lin family fears you. When young Master Lin arrives, we'll see if you still dare act so arrogantly." Now, seeing his elder brother in such a pitiful state, he could not help but feel sorrowful. "When I left, the Yun family was still the #1 noble clan in Tianwu City. How could it have fallen so far in just 3 short years, to the point of being bullied right at its own doorstep like this?" As he watched the figure before him, the young man slowly struggled to sit up, his voice filled with doubt. "Yan brother." Hearing that familiar voice, Qingyan immediately turned around and shouted anxiously, "Brother." He quickly ran over to support Yun Zion, his heart aching as he softly said, "Brother, I'm home." Yun Zion, his whole body trembling from the beating, stammered as he asked, "It's been 3 years. Have you been well?" Seeing that one of his brother's arms was gone, Qingyan froze in shock, his mouth falling open. "Your arm." Pulling Yun Zion into his embrace, Qingyan trembled with rage and asked through gritted teeth, "Was it those dogs from the Lin family who did this?" Yun Zion smiled bitterly, turned his face away and sighed helplessly. "Sigh, it's a long story." At that moment, a loud voice echoed from afar, startling the two brothers. "Yanner?" Before they could react, a joyful man came running toward them, shouting excitedly, "It's Yanner. Yanner has returned." Seeing him, the man covered his mouth to suppress his emotions, tears streaming down his face. Yun Han wept as he said, "Missing for 3 years, I thought you were already." Qingyan stepped forward and said respectfully, "Yanner has been unfilial, causing uncle to worry." Yun Han quickly helped him up with a gentle smile. "Not at all. Come, follow me inside." But right after, Qingyan immediately asked about the situation. "Uncle, how are my father, mother, and little sister? Is Taer still safe?" Yun Han's expression dimmed as he began to explain. 2 years ago, your sister Taer's cold illness suddenly healed on its own, and her cultivation began advancing rapidly. According to Yun Han, this should have been a great blessing, but unexpectedly he paused mid-sentence. A deep sorrow flashed across Yun Han's face, which he could no longer hide. Finally, he spoke the painful truth to Qingyan. "She suddenly disappeared, together with your parents." Hearing this, Qingyan cried out in shock. "Disappeared?" Yun Han continued, "They left behind only a waist token engraved with the words Heavenly Sword." Qingyan took the token in his hand and carefully examined every carved line and detail. Uneasy and confused, he muttered in thought, "Heavenly Sword? Could it be the Heavenly Sword sect, one of the supreme sects?" Yun Han turned his back, falling into deep thought before speaking his own speculation. "I fear they may have encountered misfortune." In Qingyan's eyes, sorrow was now impossible to conceal. "Father, mother, Taer, I spent 3,000 years in the celestial realm, believing that with 3,000 years of cultivation, I could sever the space-time rift and reunite with you. But..." He stopped, steadying his emotions. "Forget it. Thankfully, my divine sense remains. As long as I can restore my cultivation, I will surely find the heavenly sword sect and reunite with my family. Just as Yun Han was about to leave, King Yin suddenly remembered something and hurriedly called out, "All right, uncle." His eyes filled with complexity. He immediately asked again, "What exactly happened to my brother's arm?" Yun Han let out a long, weary sigh. "This matter is complicated. You should rest first. We'll talk about it another time." But the more everyone avoided the topic, the more suspicious King Yin became. Even uncle refuses to speak. What exactly happened to brother? At that moment, a subordinate rushed over in a panic. "Clan leader, the elders are waiting for you in the council hall." Yun Han frowned in surprise. The council hall. The subordinate hesitated before answering. "Yes, they said a new successor for the clan head position must be chosen." Hearing this, Yun Han grew so furious he nearly spat blood. He gritted his teeth and asked sharply, "They dare?" Although King Yin did not know the full story, from just a few words he could already sense what was going on. He murmured to himself, "It seems." Pausing for a moment, his gaze deepened. King Yin suspected that the clan was no longer united. Meanwhile, the sound of heated discussion echoed endlessly inside the council hall. "Clan leader, ever since Yun Zion was crippled, the successor's position has remained vacant for half a year." The one speaking was the great elder. Standing before everyone, he continued, "Today, we must appoint a new successor." He then pointed to the young man beside him. "My son Yun Yongking has already reached the 6th level of the spirit realm. Both his talent and cultivation are exceptional." The arrogant-faced young man was none other than Yun Yongking. According to Yan Luo, he was the number one among all the clan's youths of the same generation. Just then, a powerful hand slammed onto the table, the sound echoing through the hall. Yun Han pointed straight at the father and son, shouting angrily, "You must be dreaming. The position of clan head can only be inherited by one of direct bloodline. No one else has the right." But Yan Luo refused to yield, shouting back, "Yun Qingyan is missing. Yun Zion is crippled. Who else in the Yun clan still carries the direct bloodline?" He then spoke in a threatening tone, "If the clan leader insists on going against the elder's decision, we will depose you first and appoint the next head ourselves." All the gazes in the room turned toward Yun Han, filled with killing intent. He knew full well these people had already been bribed by Yan Luo, which only fueled his anger further. "You wretches!" But at that very moment, from outside the hall, a powerful and commanding voice thundered in, shocking everyone inside who dares. Right after returning, King Yin was now neatly dressed, no longer the ragged figure who had fallen from the heavens. His steps carried him calmly across the wooden threshold as he slowly entered the hall. Seeing him flesh and blood, alive, walking before his eyes, Yan Luo was so shocked that his mouth fell open in disbelief. Yun King Yin. After all, having been the celestial emperor for 3,000 years, King Yin now radiated an unmistakable aura of majesty. With a swift flick of his robe, he sat upright in the clan leader's seat. Before the stunned crowd, his voice was cold and commanding. "Elders, I, Yun Qingyan, have returned. Are your ambitions truly so impure?" His eyes glinted with disdain as he continued icily, "Perhaps it's time for you to leave." The hall erupted in murmurs. None had expected young Master Qingyan to return. The great elder's plan had failed. Young Master Qingyan was the rightful heir to the clan, 3 years ago already a 5th stage spirit realm genius, the #1 prodigy of Tianwu City. With him leading the Yun family, their future would surely rise again. What could that Yun Yongking amount to? As the legitimate son of the main bloodline, every word Qingyan spoke was like iron, silencing the old men instantly. They dared not utter a single word. Soon after, all of them bowed their heads respectfully. "Young Master Yun, we take our leave." Yan Luo, seething with rage, cursed, "A bunch of spineless fools." Yet unwilling to concede, he sneered coldly. "Yun Qingyan, you indeed have the qualifications to be clan head, but I want to know what is your current cultivation." At this question, Qingyan smiled faintly, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "3rd stage of the spirit realm." The hall burst into uproar once again. What? He's regressed. I thought the young master's return would lead us forward. How disappointing, a waste. Hearing this, Yan Luo grinned with satisfaction, delight flashing in his eyes. With such a low cultivation level, young Qingyan could hardly bear the burden of leading the clan. Yongking sneered with contempt. Young Qingyan, you're no longer the prodigy you once were. I could cripple you with one hand. Qingyan gazed at him calmly, amusement flickering across his face. Oh, is that so? Go ahead, try. That was all Yongking needed. He immediately gathered his inner force and lunged forward. I've already reached the 6th stage of the spirit realm. Crushing a 3rd stage cripple like you takes no effort. But before he could finish his thought, Qingyan gave a cold laugh. Fool. Yongking charged recklessly, taunting. Trash, you sure talk big. When Qingyan didn't even move, his arrogance grew. With your measly 3rd stage cultivation, you won't survive even one strike. But in that instant, Qingyan's eyes narrowed sharply, and his entire body released a dense, dark aura. Suddenly, a translucent barrier materialized before him, blocking Yongking's strike completely. The attacker's hand felt as though it were being sucked into Qingyan's sword, pain searing through his arm until he screamed in agony. Moments later, Yongking collapsed helplessly to the ground. Qingyan raised the tip of his boot, lifting the man's chin with disdain. Tell me, who was it you called trash just now? Now, looking at the scene, Yongking was nothing but a broken servant groveling at the feet of his master, and young Qingyan stood above them all, proud and untouchable. Now everyone again despised and gossiped. Young Yongking is Spirit Realm's 6th stage. Why young Qingyan still not strike to defeat? You know nothing. Young Master Qingyan before was #1 genius. I think young Yongking is the useless one. I support young Master Qingyan to be the clan heir. I also support. Seeing everyone all stand on his side, he angry could not bear and said through his teeth, Damn it, I kill you. But at this moment, a hand quickly moved forward to stop Yongking. Yan Luo finally also saw the problem. He said, Do not be rash. His sword sheath has problem. Qingyan sneered. He immediately stood up and praised, Seem you also have some knowledge. Then Qingyan knelt under Yun Han's feet. Uncle, everyone already no longer has doubt. Stopping a moment under his astonishment, he continued, Please uncle announce me as clan heir. In front of everyone, Yun Han hesitated. Good, I now announce. But Yan Luo still not convinced. He quickly said again, Wait. Holding his son to stand up, Yan Luo continued, Just now he only took advantage by weapon. Pointing at his face, he shouted, 1 month later is clan grand assembly. If you not use that sword sheath to attack Yun Yongking, I will admit you are heir of clan. Yun Han also no longer endured. He stood up. Qingyan only Spirit Realm 3 stage. 1 month later also cannot increase much. Great Elder, you shameless too much. But now Qingyan immediately cut his uncle's words. Right, Great Elder, 1 month. Qingyan pretended to pick his ear. He calmly said, Seem a bit long. Hearing that everyone was shocked. What? He smiled bright as spring, then continued, To defeat him, 7 days is enough. Yan Luo by his arrogance was angry to trembling. He replied, Good, brat you bold, do not forget what you said today. According to Yan Luo, 7 days later if not defeat Yun Yongking my son, then obediently hand over position of clan heir. Everyone noisy, 7 days later have good show to see. So just now young Master Qingyan because of that sword sheath. Then one, I already said, with cultivation of Spirit Realm 3 stage. How can easily defeat Spirit Realm 6 stage? Yun Han worried. He went forward, whispered to him, Qingyan, this proposal may be too risky. That punch just now indeed thanks to sword sheath behind protected you. He hesitated, not dare speak directly. If fight bare-handed with him, with your current cultivation. Qingyan comforted, Uncle rest assured, but... Stopping a moment, he quickly gave condition. If I win, can tell me all things about Brother Zion. Not know why, facing that request, he showed hesitation and difficulty. But finally Yun Han also knew cannot hide from him, so said, Good, I promise you. Scene shifts to the Van residence. Inside, Fan and Ham murmured to himself, In order to return to the mortal world, he had almost exhausted all the cultivation he had achieved in the celestial realm. Being able to retain the third stage of the spirit realm was already fortunate. He sat still cultivating, honest with himself. With my current level of cultivation, I truly cannot defeat Van Duong Fan. Then a sharp gleam appeared in his eyes. Van Anham sneered. It seems there is no choice but to use extraordinary means. Thinking of this, he immediately stood up. At this moment, using pills to increase cultivation was the fastest way. He looked at the alchemy furnaces before him with delight. But during the past 3 years the Van family probably had no alchemists. The old alchemy room had fallen into disrepair with no one cleaning it. According to Van Anham's understanding, in the celestial realm, alchemy was an ordinary matter. But in the mortal world only grandmasters could command true fire to refine pills. Van Anham tossed the bundle of herbs up high. It seems I must personally refine them again. Ganoderma, poria, bone grass, all taken from the family's medicine vault, each aged 10 years. With a single wave of his hand, all of them entered the furnace neatly in order. Quickly channeling fire through his hand, he shouted, "Control flame technique," and the fire from his palm struck directly into the furnace before him. In just a short moment, the furnace blazed up, smoke billowing, the embers glowing bright red. Van Anham used all his strength to refine the pills. Sweat poured from his forehead like rain. All his inner power was focused into the alchemy furnace before him. Eyes closed in concentration, he began chanting incantations. After a long while, Van Anham began to check. Very good. Let me use my divine sense to see the situation inside the furnace. From what he observed with his ability, this time more than 30 pills should be formed. Van Anham calculated, if all succeed, after swallowing them my cultivation will rise to the 5th stage of the spirit realm. 7 days later I will defeat Van Duong Fan. Time passed like that. In a flash 3 days and 3 nights had gone by. Inside, Van Anham was still focused on using his fire to heat the alchemy furnace. Though exhausted and gasping for breath, he was filled with anticipation. 3 more minutes and all the pills would be ready. But at that moment, the warehouse door suddenly burst open as someone rushed inside. Van Anham was startled. Damn it, didn't I tell Steward Lamb to guard the area? Why is someone entering here? As soon as he turned around, something suddenly pressed against his face, startling Van Anham. Before he could react, the girl had already pushed him to the ground. When she saw him, Hiu Yen immediately reached out and gently touched the face she had longed to see for years. Van Anham, it really is you, she said softly. I just heard the news that you had returned, so I came here right away. Her closeness and trembling voice made his heart stir for a moment, but the instant he recognized who she was, Van Anham's expression turned cold. Get out, he said sharply. Hiu Yen looked hurt and said in a trembling voice, Van Anham, don't you recognize me? I am Ta Hiu Yen. His gaze remained indifferent. He looked at her steadily, then replied, I know, and that is the only reason I did not kill you. Having said that, he stood up quickly, his eyes never glancing her way again. In truth, he was not very concerned about her, only quietly relieved that before his cultivation technique had been interrupted, half of his elixir had already taken form. Seeing that he said nothing, Hiu Yen tried again with a pitiful tone, Van Anham, I know you hate me, but after 3 years apart, do you not miss me at all? He looked at her, surprised, and asked, Miss you? Then his voice turned cold as he continued, we once had a betrothal, but you betrayed me for your own gain, married another man, and made me a laughingstock in all of Thien Vu City. Frustration flashed across his face as he looked toward the alchemy furnace and shouted, For 3 days and nights I worked without rest refining this elixir, and because of you, all that effort nearly went to waste. If 4 days from now I cannot defeat Van Duong Fan, he stopped abruptly, for Hiu Yen had fallen silent, her eyes brimming with tears. The things he said were undeniable. He had not expected his words to make her cry like that and stood frozen for a moment. Yet in the end, he could not bear to see a woman weep because of him, so he sighed softly and turned away. Then, resolutely, he said, "Leave. This is the last kindness I can offer you. Go." But Hiu Yen did not give up. "I know I owe you too much," she said in a trembling voice, "and that is why I came today, to give you what is most precious to me." Than and Ham was startled. "The most precious thing? You are already married into the royal family of the Thien Vo dynasty. What could possibly remain?" Hiu Yen lowered her head and spoke softly. "For 3 years, I have never let him come close to me." Tears streamed down her face as she continued, "After you left, I finally understood that the one I truly love has always been you." Seeing her cry, Than and Ham's expression grew complicated. After all, they had once shared a bond, and though everything had long since changed, seeing her tears stirred feelings in him that he could not quite describe. In his heart, Than and Ham also silently admitted that Ta Hiu Yen was indeed the first woman who had ever moved him. But 3 years ago, she betrayed him, leaving him with pain so deep it tore through his soul. Than and Ham still could not forget that night when he was drunk to the point of losing himself. At that time, he stood quietly behind a large tree, silently watching the bridal procession go by. Though his heart ached, he still chose to respect her decision. Back then, Than and Ham did not blame Hiu Yen. He only held back tears, blaming himself for loving her too much. That painful memory now felt like shattered glass, but things were different today. After spending 3,000 years in the immortal realm, Than and Ham was no longer the young man he once was. Now filled with anger, he forcefully pulled his hand away. "Ta Hiu Yen, what kind of man do you think Than and Ham is?" Looking at the woman crying before him, he said frankly, "Do you know that by doing this, you are not only humiliating yourself, but also humiliating me?" Hiu Yen knelt at his feet and pleaded, "Than and Ham, I only wish to give myself to you, whether out of love or regret. Please allow me just once to give myself to you." At that moment, a mocking voice suddenly sounded. "Oh, I thought the great young master of the Van family was in secluded training. But it turns out that after 3 days and 3 nights of hiding, he was secretly meeting another man's wife." The one speaking was Van Viet, the grandson of the Grand Elder. Being seen like this made Hiu Yen cover her face in shame and cry. But Than and Ham immediately stepped in front of her. "What?" he said coldly. "Do you also want 3 days and 3 nights?" He paused for a moment, then took off his outer robe and covered Hiu Yen's disheveled form. With a mocking look in his eyes, Than and Ham said scornfully, "I think 3 seconds would be too much for you." The sword scabbard at his side fell to the ground with a sharp clang. Van Viet, angered and humiliated, could only stammer, "You." Gathering his inner power, he shouted, "You're just a cripple now, only at the 3rd level of the spirit realm, without your sword to protect you. A single punch from me will destroy you." Than and Ham refused to back down. He gathered his own inner force and replied, "You came at the right time." Looking at his opponent, he showed a trace of amusement. "Half my alchemy furnace was ruined, and I was just looking for a place to vent my anger." Van Viet roared, "Than and Ham, let me see what strength you have left." As soon as he spoke, both of them threw their fists forward with full power. But in just a moment, Van Viet's wrist was bent backward, and pain spread through his arm as if his bones were breaking. He couldn't believe it and shouted in shock, "How can this be?" Before he could recover, Than and Ham struck again, his fist landing heavily on Van Viet. Van Viet was sent flying backward, spitting blood as he hit the ground. Than and Ham's hand was now covered in blood, the blood of Van Viet. Seeing him fall to the ground, defeated in just 2 moves, Than and Ham looked at him with complete disdain. "Not afraid of death, is that what you call it?" Seeing Than and Ham fight for her, Hiu Yen's eyes lit up with joy and hope. "Enham Kaka," she said softly, "so you do still care about me after all." She stepped forward, gently took Than and Ham's hand, and said, "You saw how Van Viet insulted me, didn't you? That's why you killed him." He did not bother to explain his actions. With a cold expression, Than and Ham simply took back his robe and said, "You should leave." Hiu Yen still tried to follow him, reaching out as if to say something. Enham Kaka, but before she could finish, Than Enham interrupted sharply. If you don't go now, the entire Van residence will know you secretly came to find me. When that reaches your husband's ears, I'm afraid things will not end well. Seeing that he was firmly rejecting her, Hiu Yen finally confessed everything. In truth, that man and I have not yet been married. Than Enham was startled. What? Hiu Yen continued, her eyes flickering with hope. That day when I went to the Flower Bridge, it was only for the engagement ceremony. I have not yet officially married into the royal capital. If you agree, I will annul that engagement. And just then, a large figure suddenly leapt down from above, landing heavily near Than Enham. The force of his landing shattered the ceiling. Than Enham looked up in shock, momentarily stunned. The man's gaze was sharp and cold, carrying a murderous intensity. His name was Van Mong. He cast a disdainful look at Hiu Yen and said icily, "Did you not hear the young master tell you to get out?" Grabbing Hiu Yen by the neck, he continued coldly, "With looks like yours, you think you are worthy to offer yourself to the young master." Hiu Yen trembled in fear and stammered, Thien Thur Hiat Du, Van Mong." Van Mong was the executioner of the Van family clan, and countless people had died at his hands. Not only did outsiders fear him, but even many within the clan were wary of him. Faced with his terrifying aura, Hiu Yen panicked and ran away, crying out, "Don't come any closer." As soon as she left, Van Mong knelt down. "Young Master Enham, are you unharmed? I heard that Van Viet was trying to cause trouble for you, so I returned at once." Than Enham quickly helped him up. "Uncle Mong, I appreciate your concern. Everything is fine now." But Van Mong remained kneeling. "Young Master Enham, I heard of your return some time ago. I did not come to greet you immediately. Please forgive me." Than Enham replied politely, "Uncle Mong, please don't take it to heart. You are my elder. It should be I who comes to visit you." Van Mong sighed heavily and said, Young Master Enham, it wasn't easy for you to come back, but your parents and Lady Tai disappeared a year ago." Your whole family. Than Enham quickly interrupted, "Rest assured, Uncle Mong, I will find my parents. Our family will surely be reunited." Van Mong brightened and said, Good. If you need anything, just say the word." Pointing at the body nearby, Than Enham said calmly, "Uncle Mong, please take Van Viet's corpse to the Grand Elder. Tell him that if he wants to make trouble, he should send someone more capable." As he spoke, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Lifting the body onto his shoulder, Van Mong nodded and said, "Yes, young Master Enham. Only a man with an iron hand is worthy to become the next head of our Van family." Before leaving, he spoke in a firm tone, 7 days from now, young master, you will surely win." Than Enham replied indifferently, "Of course." When only Than Enham was left in the storage room, he sat quietly and counted the number of pills he had refined. This time, he had produced 16 Kai gathering pills and 17 failed ones that had been transformed into crimson venom pills. He then carefully stored them all in his robe. A single crimson venom pill, if used properly, contained enough poison to kill 10,000 fully grown adults. Picking up another small bottle, he calculated intently. 16 Kai gathering pills left. After doing the math, Than Enham tilted his head back and swallowed all 16 pills in one go. He then sat upright and began circulating his inner energy to absorb them. For an ordinary cultivator at the 3rd stage of the spirit realm, consuming so many Kai gathering pills at once would have caused their body to explode on the spot. But for him, even 16 pills had not reached 1/10,000th of his physical limit. Thinking this, Than Enham's eyes widened, and he shouted in a deep voice, "Gather." Feeling the immense energy surging through his body, he was overjoyed. "Excellent. From the 3rd stage of the spirit realm, I've recovered to the 4th stage." Just then, a calm voice suddenly rang out, startling him. "I heard you killed Van Viet." Than Enham's gaze immediately shifted toward the door, and the killing intent in his eyes flared instinctively. The one who had arrived was Van Heen. Judging by his heavy breathing, He had clearly rushed over in haste. Suppressing his killing intent, Van and Ham looked up in surprise and called out, "Brother." Van Heen quickly strode in, silent but clearly displeased. He shouted angrily, "Ham, you were too reckless." Van Viet may not have been a direct descendant of the Van clan, but he was still the grandson of the Grand Elder. Seeing his brother so agitated, Van and Ham immediately stepped forward to reassure him. "Brother, don't worry." Then he added calmly, "The Grand Elder isn't a fool. He'll have no choice but to endure this." Meanwhile, in the Grand Elder's mansion, mournful cries tore through the quiet air. A woman named Tran Le was weeping bitterly, cursing through her tears, "Van Than and Ham, that damned beast, how dare he kill my nephew?" She then threw herself at the feet of Ngan Loy, crying, "Husband, you must seek justice for our nephew." But instead, the old man struck her harshly across the face. Foolish woman. Yet Tran Le seemed not to understand her mistake. "Van Than and Ham is going to duel with our son Van Duong Than soon. I only sent Van Viet to test his cultivation. What was wrong with that?" Looking at his ignorant wife, Ngan Loy trembled with fury, his words choking in his throat. "You finally," he roared, "servants, lock her up. Until Duong Than returns, no one is to release her." As she was dragged away, Tran Le cried out unwillingly, "Husband, are you really going to let our nephew die without demanding justice?" As Tran Le was dragged away, her cries gradually faded into the distance. Ngan Loy silently watched his wife being taken, his face dark with contemplation. Of course, he had not truly wished to imprison her, but deep down he feared that this woman's recklessness would one day bring disaster upon their entire family. When everyone had left, the old man began to think carefully. Van Viet's real name was Tran Viet. He was not even of the Van bloodline. It was only out of greed for the prestige of the Van clan that he had changed his surname. As the Grand Elder, Ngan Loy understood better than anyone that internal family disputes must never involve outsiders. That was a rule established by the founders of the Van clan. But if he were to defy that rule, he paused, his face turning pale, and clenched his teeth as he sank into deep thought. Meanwhile, Van and Ham was recounting everything to Van Heen. Smirking with confidence, he said, "If anyone dares to interfere, everyone else will unite to destroy them." Stretching out lazily, he added, "Van Viet was nothing. What right did he have to get involved? If the Grand Elder dares to speak up for his half-blooded grandson, his entire family will be erased from the Van clan's register." Van Heen still looked uneasy. "That only makes me more worried," he said. After a brief pause, something seemed to come to his mind. "Right, Ham." He finally voiced his concern. "You've never been one to fight for power. Why risk your life to challenge Van Duong Than 7 days from now?" Van and Ham sat upright, his expression solemn. "I truly have no interest in the position of heir, but there are reasons that leave me no choice." Hearing that, Van Heen grew somber. After a moment of silence, he murmured with a hint of guilt, "It's because of me, isn't it?" He looked down at his crippled arm, his voice tinged with bitterness. "It's because of me?" Van and Ham didn't hide it. "Yes," he said plainly, even though Van Heen had already known. Hearing it confirmed by his brother made his chest tighten painfully. He gazed off into the distance, feeling miserable that his younger brother had to shoulder such a burden for him. Finally, he admitted softly, "Ham, I didn't tell you the truth before because I wanted to protect you." Van and Ham suddenly stood up and replied calmly, "I know." Then, with unwavering resolve, he declared, "I will use the full strength of the Van clan to avenge you, brother." The room fell silent. Van Heen stared at his once gentle, innocent younger brother now so utterly transformed. His eyes held a mix of pride and sorrow. And Ham? Van and Ham didn't stay. He leapt from the ground and called back, "Brother, 4 days from now, wait for good news." Smiling faintly, he added, "I'm leaving to defeat Van Duong Than. I need to retrieve something first." Soon, he arrived at his destination. Passing by groups of people training fervently, he heard the loud commands of an instructor. "Raise your arms, steady your stance." Under the strict guidance, the trainees were progressing quickly. Watching them, Than and Ham couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia. How nostalgic those old days were. Memories surged back as Than and Ham recalled that in the old days he was still a little boy with a pure smile untouched by the whirlpool of conflict. He and his younger sister Tai Nhi often came here, the two of them holding hands and running around this place carefree and untroubled by the world. Than and Ham remembered it clearly, and before him now was the martial training ground as his steps moved forward calmly. According to his memory, this place also contained a secret location of great importance to the Van clan. The Technique Pavilion. The Technique Pavilion was the sacred repository of martial arts of the Van clan, storing all the techniques collected since the founding of the family. The first floor held 1,000 basic techniques, the second floor contained 300 mid-level techniques, and the third floor preserved more than 30 high-grade human-level techniques, each extremely valuable. What made him most proud was that only disciples of the Van family who passed the trials of the Tower Guardian were qualified to study the higher-level techniques on the third floor. Then Than and Ham extended his hand and quickly opened the door before him and stepped slowly inside. In the room at that moment, an elderly man with white hair was puffing on a pipe between his lips. As soon as he looked at the boy, he asked in a cold voice, "Who are you?" Hearing that, Than and Ham respectfully replied, "Van Than and Ham." The Grand Elder then looked toward him again and asked, "For what purpose do you borrow the book?" Than and Ham did not beat around the bush and respectfully answered, "To prepare for battle." The elder reached out his hand without even glancing at him and asked coldly again, "Identity token." Hearing this, Than and Ham froze and stood there unable to find an answer. At last he chose to confess honestly, "I lost it." In truth, he had his own troubles, having crossed between the mortal and celestial realms twice and lost all personal belongings. Hearing that, the Grand Elder seemed displeased. The identity token is an important family relic. If you cannot even keep such a token safe, how can you guarantee to return the borrowed technique intact? After speaking, he gathered his inner energy and struck forcefully toward Than and Ham, shouting, "Get out!" The elder's eyes glared coldly, showing clear disapproval toward the boy. Yet Than and Ham still stood firm where he was, which made the elder a bit astonished. "I am a moon stage martial expert, yet my pressure has no effect on a 17 or 18-year-old youth at the fourth essence stage." This surprised him greatly. The atmosphere fell silent, the ground beneath Than and Ham's feet cracking under the elder's pressure. In the end, the elder stopped trying to bar his way, turned, and said indifferently, "Go in." Than and Ham still cheerfully and respectfully replied, "Thank you, Grand Elder." Then the elder warned, "You are a direct descendant of the Van clan, so you may enter the third floor to choose a technique, but you must obey 2 rules. He paused before continuing. "First, you may choose only 1 manual. Second, you may not stay longer than half a watch." Than and Ham, in tattered clothes, stood respectfully before his senior and said, "This junior understands." Then he calmly walked past the Grand Elder, who watched him with a heavy expression, thinking to himself, "With you perhaps that manual will finally be comprehended." As that thought crossed his mind, he could not help but look at the boy's departing figure with faint expectation. Than and Ham quickly stepped inside and lifted his gaze toward the towering shelves filled with books stacked higher than his head. He smiled helplessly. So this was the entire collection of high-grade techniques that the Van clan had guarded for so many years. Immediately he circulated his inner energy, feeling quite satisfied. Each manual here would be enough for an ordinary martial artist to study for several years. Saying that, Than and Ham rose into the air, his body radiating a mystical glow, as he began taking several books from the shelves. He muttered, "But with the divine sense I cultivated in the immortal realm," as he scratched his head helplessly while glancing through them. Learning all these techniques would only take 3 minutes. And just like that, Than and Ham absorbed every single manual he had chosen from the shelves in one go. At that moment, within the spiritual sea of Van Than and Ham, he was still channeling his inner energy and suddenly shouted, "Seven-star finger." Without stopping, he continued spinning and moving gracefully in midair, performing the meteor fist technique. He kept unleashing move after move in the air until finally he roared. Ninefold palm. Next came the ice mountain palm, and as he struck the ground below split apart from the impact. After that technique, Than and Ham slowly descended as the books he had studied fell one by one to the floor with soft thuds. Seeing the result, he smiled proudly and said with satisfaction, "I have finished learning them all." Clenching his fists tightly, Than and Ham made up his mind. "Van Duong Thon, 3 days from now you will lose to me." But then before him appeared a single book emanating an eerie, enchanting energy, bound tightly in chains. Than and Ham felt something strange and quickly turned around, sensing that ominous aura. Reaching out toward it with curiosity, he muttered, "Strange, I don't remember learning this manual." Yet the moment his fingers were about to touch it, the book suddenly released a misty smoke. Alarmed, Than and Ham stepped back, shielding his nose with his hand, and murmured, "What is this?" At that instant, a large shadow appeared before him, startling him completely. From within the book emerged a massive ape that glared at him and roared, "Foolish Junior." The ape extended its huge arm and bellowed, "A mere 4th stage essence brat like you dares to comprehend the technique this deity guards." As it finished speaking, it struck fiercely toward him, its eyes blazing with fury as if he were its mortal enemy. Somehow Than and Ham managed to dodge and thought to himself, "This technique is no simple matter. I never expected it to be guarded by a spirit beast." Than and Ham spoke coldly. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. Then after a moment of thought said, "How about I just take you in as well?" As soon as he finished speaking, Than and Ham swung his blade fiercely toward the giant ape before him, causing it to roar in pain. Once the strike was done, he calmly sheathed his sword and placed it back behind his back as if nothing had happened. Then he sensed something strange. Looking over his shoulder to observe, he saw that from the once ferocious gaze now appeared a small, adorable baby monkey looking at him innocently, its murderous intent completely gone. The little monkey knelt down and held out a book. "Master, this humble one was blind and failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please accept this heaven-rank cultivation manual." Seeing the manual before him, Than and Ham's eyes lit up. "A heaven-rank technique." The little monkey continued, "This humble one resides within the book. Should Master need anything in the future, just summon me." With that, it darted back into the book, clearly the spirit beast guarding it. When it was gone, the manual dropped to the floor like an ordinary lifeless book. Than and Ham picked it up. A heaven-rank technique was hundreds of times more valuable than any human-rank high-grade technique. To think such a treasure existed within the technique pavilion. Though he had cultivated hundreds of heaven-rank techniques in the immortal realm, his current level was still too low to use them properly. This one would do for now. After that, Than and Ham walked out and addressed the elder. "Supreme Elder, this junior wishes to borrow this book." Seeing the manual in his hands, the old man was astonished. Though he had somewhat expected this outcome, it was still unbelievable. The Supreme Elder hesitated for a moment. In 300 years, this was the first person able to retrieve that book from the pavilion. Looking at the dirt-covered young man before him, he finally said, "This book has fate with you. Take it." Than and Ham bowed respectfully. "Many thanks, Supreme Elder." After obtaining the manual, he did not linger any longer and turned to leave. He did not notice the Supreme Elder struggling to contain his joy, silently exclaiming, "Excellent." Watching Than and Ham's fading figure, the elder rejoiced inwardly. "Our Van family finally has a worthy successor. The humiliation our clan and the Hyen clan suffered that year, he will surely help us reclaim." After leaving, Than and Ham finally had time to look at himself and was slightly surprised. He murmured, "The pressure from the Supreme Elder and that spirit ape tore my clothes to this state." Stretching his limbs, he calmly calculated, "There are still 3 days until the duel. I'll return to my room, change clothes, and continue cultivating." Time passed quickly, and by evening Than and Ham had already changed into a neat set of clothes. Just then, a hurried shout echoed, "Brother and Ham, something's wrong." Hearing Van Heen's anxious voice, Than and Ham rushed out. "Brother, what happened?" The nearby servants were momentarily dazed, exclaiming, "Young master, that outfit looks amazing. Red truly suits you best." But before they could finish, Van Heen grabbed Than and Ham's hand and pulled him along, speaking urgently, "Brother and Ham, come with me to Uncle Mong's place. Phi Phi was bullied at Dong Thang Tavern." Hearing that, Than and Ham was shocked. "What?" In the bustling street, everyone pointed at the girl screaming and jeering without anyone stepping in to help. Seeing Phi Phi being humiliated, they murmured among themselves, "That Jiang Dong is really brazen to humiliate the Van family third young lady in the middle of the street." Ever since that incident, the Van family has not dared to raise its head, allowing anyone to trample them as they please. Jiang Dong insulted the girl in front of him. Indeed, the Van family is a bunch of trash. But the lady of the Van household is truly a rare beauty. Humiliated in the street, Phi Phi could only cry in sorrow. She did not even dare to resist. Jiang Dong pressed his face close to Phi Phi's neck, inhaling, "If you want to glare, then glare. You will soon beg me in tears." He bent down to kiss her body, but his lips instead met someone's shoe. Phi Phi looked surprised while Jiang Dong continued to smother kisses, not yet noticing. The scene was ridiculous. Suddenly a strange laugh made Jiang Dong freeze for a moment. Very quickly he sensed something wrong and spat, yelling, "Who is that?" Seeing Than and Ham, he could not help shouting in astonishment, "Van Than and Ham." Dressed in blazing red, Than and Ham smiled broadly and mocked, "Dog who licks feet." The smile remained on his face as he said, "Long time no see." Then with a straight kick, he struck the region he should not. The feeling like an egg cracking, Jiang Dong clutched himself and collapsed in tears. Shaking, he pointed at Than and Ham accusingly and cried, "Van Than and Ham, you are cruel." Witnessing this, everyone burst into laughter while Than and Ham remained indifferent. "Is that so?" Then a cruel glint flashed in his eyes as he glared at him. "I have crueler tricks." He quickly slid his hand into Jiang Dong's chest and drew it across. Jiang Dong did not even react, but the place Than and Ham passed over felt wrong. Now Than and Ham cultivated inner power, as if drawing the inner energy from Jiang Dong's body outward. Then he squeezed hard and shouted without mercy, "Of course I will cripple you." On the street, Jiang Dong's screams rang out. Van Than and Ham crippled Jiang family martial hall owner Ling Hai. Ling Hai is where fighters store spiritual essence for absorbing spirit power. Ling Hai is ruined. Not only is cultivation destroyed, it will be difficult to continue training in the future. He is the successor of the martial hall. This is tantamount to killing him. Seeing him spit blood and lie sprawled on the ground, the henchmen shouted, "Van Than and Ham, you are bullying people too far." Immediately they drew swords and rushed at Than and Ham, shouting, "Avenge the young master." From behind Than and Ham, a loud voice carrying several portions of inner force sounded, "Young master, leave it to me." Van Mong with a single strike knocked those henchmen away. A bunch of brats not worth dirtying the young master's hands. They now looked like sandbags, letting Van Mong strike at will. Before his overwhelming might they were nothing. Seeing him finish so quickly, Than and Ham cheered, "Not bad, not bad, Uncle Mong, your skills have improved a lot in 3 years." Then Van Mong turned his gaze toward the one who had dared to bully Phi Phi in the street. "Young master, how shall we deal with Jiang Dong?" Hearing the question, Than and Ham rubbed his chin and smiled slyly, "Ha ha." Jiang Dong trembled. He could not believe that in only 3 years Than and Ham had changed so much. Then Than and Ham said, "Tie him up, tell Jiang family martial hall to bring 100,000 silver tomorrow morning to ransom him if they have no money." He paused, then stepped on Jiang Dong's head and declared loudly, "Those who bully my clan shall be killed without mercy." The crowd could not help but whisper, was not Van Than and Ham only at the 3rd stage of the spirit realm? How could his aura be so powerful? This is the natural dignity of a true martial warrior. Shameful. After 3 years, the Van family has finally risen again. Not so fast. I heard the Lin family has also made some moves recently. Then Than and Ham approached Phi Phi, who stared at the young man before her in surprise. He smiled gently and spoke softly, Fi, are you all right? Come, let us go home. The words were simple, yet for Fi they brought great comfort. Her eyes shone brightly, as she felt moved to tears, throwing herself into his arms, and happily replied, When morning came inside Fan and Ham's private room, young master, these are the special medicinal ingredients bought with the 100,000 silver from the ransom of the Zhang Martial Hall. Looking at the pile of herbs before him, Fan and Ham nodded in satisfaction. Good, thank you, Uncle Mong. He paused, then instructed Uncle Mong, go outside next. I must cultivate something important. Stand guard for me and protect the formation. Van Mong quickly replied, yes, young master. At that moment, in the courtyard of Van Fan and Ham's residence, Van Mong stood silently guarding outside, not letting anyone disturb him. Meanwhile, two masked men whispered from afar, what method did Van Fan and Ham use to make the blood hand of 1,000 slaughters Van Mong protect him? They focused and discussed. Elder Grandmaster told us to monitor every move of Van Fan and Ham. What shall we report now? Did he not just comprehend techniques at the martial law pavilion last night? Just tell the elder he is cultivating. One of them spoke, while jumping down anyway. Only 3 days remain until the duel. He is just a useless third-stage cultivator. Whatever tricks he plays, he surely cannot defeat Van Duong Fan the master. The other agreed, laughing, let us go drink. Unbeknownst to them, Fan and Ham knew everything. He smiled cunningly. The Grand Elder sent people to watch me. Then he gathered inner energy, focusing on his finger. When I seize the position of family heir, it will also be the time to cleanse the clan. As soon as he finished speaking, fresh blood flowed from his hand. The moment it soaked in, Fan and Ham smiled with satisfaction. Spirit Emperor Core Knight, Luminous Jade, Peachwood Talisman, Dragon Slayer Blade, combined with my own essence, blood together with pure star flame, which only a high-level alchemist can endure, he said, while staring at the light shining from his hand, pride gleaming in his eyes. According to Fan and Ham, when that happened, he would refine the spirit-gathering array to absorb spiritual energy from thousands of miles around. The blood on his hands quickly spread across the papers, forming characters. Fan and Ham looked at them and sighed in relief. It was done. Then he called out loudly, where is the spirit monkey? And as soon as the monkey heard Fan and Ham calling for it, it immediately appeared. Master, he instructed, quickly arrange the talismans at the places I marked with my divine sense. The spirit monkey respectfully replied, yes, master. Right after that, it swiftly carried a pile of spirit talismans in its arms and flew forward at high speed. In the blink of an eye, the spirit monkey had already stuck the talismans onto the tall tree trunks. The places where it attached them were of course very difficult to detect with the naked eye. Afraid that they might not be secure, the spirit monkey even carefully stomped on each talisman with its foot to make them fit more tightly together. Standing high above, observing and calculating, Fan and Ham thought to himself, as an immortal emperor, now that his cultivation was restored, he no longer needed to care about the mortal realms. If he could absorb enough spiritual energy, then step by step ascending to the heavens would not be difficult. He paused for a moment, slightly uncertain. It was just that he did not know how much spiritual energy this small gathering formation could attract. While he was still lost in thought, the spirit monkey suddenly appeared and reported, Master, the formation has been arranged. Then he quickly formed hand seals, focusing his inner power. When the anomaly appeared in the sky, Fan and Ham was already ready. Let us begin. Van Mong looked at the waves of spiritual energy surrounding him and was momentarily astonished. Fan and Ham, however, paid no attention and continued to focus on drawing the life force around him into his body. It felt as though everything nearby was being continuously absorbed into him. Fan and Ham felt his body becoming more alive. Those energies were also swirling together, forming a large circle that emitted a mysterious glow. The surroundings kept changing. One could see with the naked eye that inner energy from all directions was rushing here. Van Mong was so terrified that he fell to the ground, stammering, Ham, young master Ham, are you all right? Standing before this overwhelming aura, Fan and Ham calmly replied, I am fine. Finally, Fan and Ham broke through. The spiritual energy within 8,000 miles gathered here. Unexpectedly, it allowed him to rise another level in spiritual energy, breaking through to the 5th stage of the essence realm. Hearing this, Van Mong was even more astonished, his mouth agape. 8,000 miles of spiritual energy. Immediately after that, Van Mong knelt down. Young Master Enham, could you tell me how you managed to do this? Van Enham did not hide anything and replied, nothing much. I merely arranged a spirit gathering formation in the courtyard. Then he quickly soared up gracefully, flying past Van Mong. The elder was now deeply astonished. A spirit gathering formation. This was something far beyond the understanding of an elder like him. Van Mong looked over in panic. Enham, young Master Enham, not only do you know how to refine pills, you are also a grandmaster of formations. Van Enham calmly replied. Just a grandmaster level formation master. Nothing to be surprised about. Hearing that, Van Mong broke into a cold sweat. He then said, nothing to be surprised about. From what Van Mong knew, formation grandmasters were even more respected than alchemists. Young Master Van, he paused, still bewildered. Perhaps he was the first formation grandmaster in Tianwu City. Seeing his expression, Van Enham could not help but laugh aloud. He smiled softly to himself. I have cultivated in the immortal realm for 3,000 years. My eyes see far beyond ordinary people. Mong Uncle's strange reaction is understandable. Then Van Enham said to him, Mong Uncle, your cultivation has remained at the 7th level of the essence realm. It must have been at least 5 years already, right? Van Mong was startled. Young Master Enham, you could tell. Van Enham did not hide anything. He nodded quickly and answered, yes. Moreover, Van Enham could clearly see that behind Van Mong, there were resentful spirits clinging to him that would not disperse. Judging by his guess, Van Mong had been a sword of the Van clan. The number of people he had killed in his lifetime must have reached 4 digits, naturally attracting countless karmic grievances. Those grievances were the finest nourishment for demonic energy, and also the greatest obstacle for a warrior on the martial path. Van Enham then placed his hand on the man's chest and gently asked, Mong Uncle, do you trust me? Van Mong was startled. Wasn't this the same gesture young Master Enham made when he abolished Jiang Dung's spirit sea? Faced with this question and action from him, Van Mong fell silent and pondered for a moment. Then he exhaled and calmly replied, I trust you. No matter what young Master Enham does to me, Van Mong will never regret it. Hearing his answer, Van Enham was very pleased. Good. After that, Van Enham tightened his fingers. Van Mong felt as if his whole body was being torn apart. At the same time, he let out a painful scream. Van Enham said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on Van Mong's body as he continued to draw something out. After a long moment, streams of dark, evil energy followed his body and were expelled outside. Van Mong was lifted into the air by Van Enham. Although the pain was intense, he still tried his best to endure it. Then Van Enham extended his hand toward him and shouted loudly, Disperse! Finally, it was done. Van Enham gently wiped the sweat from his forehead and exhaled in exhaustion. Now Van Mong finally realized. He stammered in surprise. Enham, young Master Enham, just now you... He paused, feeling his body becoming light and floating. Van Mong quickly guessed. Could it be that you have dispelled the karmic burden within me? Feeling the new strength in his body, his surprise had yet to fade. I am already at the 8th level of the essence realm. With Van Enham's help, Van Mong had finally broken through. Overwhelmed with gratitude beyond words, he immediately knelt down. Van Mong offers his deepest thanks to young Master Enham. Van Enham smiled cheerfully and replied, It's all right, Mong Uncle, please stand up. I told you, you are one of Van Enham's people. Clenching his fist, his words carried firm resolve. I will never let my people suffer loss. At that moment Van Heen hurriedly ran over, shouting anxiously, Enham brother. Before Van Enham could react, Van Heen quickly continued, Hurry, pack your things and leave this place. He was so tense that his words came out in fragments. My father has already arranged everything. You must hide for a while. Van en Ham was surprised. He immediately looked at him and asked in astonishment, "Hide." Van Heen hastily explained the situation. "That's right. Van Duong Than has returned. He knows you killed Van Viet. He will definitely seek revenge for Van Viet on the day of the duel." After taking a breath, he continued, "Moreover, my father has heard news that Van Duong Than has recently broken through to the 7th level of the Essence Realm." Van Heen's face darkened. "Enham brother has only just recovered to the 5th level of the Essence Realm. If you fight now, you will die." Yet Than Enham remained calm and indifferent. Seeing him like that made Van Heen anxious. He quickly shook Than Enham and said, "Hey." Then Than Enham stepped forward and patted Van Heen's shoulder. "Brother, thank you. No matter how strong Van Duong Than's cultivation is, he cannot threaten me." Van Heen hesitated, but Enham brother. Before he could finish, Than Enham raised his hand to interrupt. Then Than Enham pointed toward his house. "Brother, do you notice anything different about this garden today?" Looking around once, Van Heen asked in confusion, "What's different?" Suddenly he raised his head, his eyes following Than Enham's gaze around them. He quickly noticed that the surrounding space felt unusual. Van Heen was stunned. This is... He grew even more astonished. "The spiritual energy in this courtyard is twice as dense as outside, and it keeps increasing," Van Mong proudly said, reporting to young Master Heen. It was young Master Enham who set up a spirit gathering formation here. Van Heen was dumbfounded, his mouth wide open in disbelief. A spirit gathering formation. Unable to contain his surprise, he asked, Enham brother, you know how to arrange a spirit gathering formation?" Than Enham nodded. "Yes, but I did not set it up only for myself. It is also for you." Hearing that, Van Heen froze, unable to believe what he heard. Then Than Enham spoke sincerely. "Brother, I heard from the servants that not only has your left arm been crippled, but your spirit sea was also destroyed by a villain. That is why you were humiliated and bullied by an outsider." He looked at Van Heen with sorrow. "After the duel ends, I will bring you and uncle to live in my courtyard. I will use the spirit gathering formation and another treasure to reconstruct your spirit sea and left arm, helping you return to the martial path." His words were firm and filled with conviction. Than Enham waved his hand excitedly. "I want those who once mistreated you to pay the price. I want them to kneel before you and beg for forgiveness. I want the entire Chanwu city to know." Channeling his inner force, he made a vow. "Now that I have returned, I will never allow vile people to trample on my clan again." Suddenly Van Heen fell silent, strangely quiet. Than Enham turned around in surprise and asked, "Brother, what's wrong?" Van Heen could not hold back his tears. It had been a long time since he last cried, not even when he was humiliated. "Nothing," he said softly. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am to have such a good brother like you." The two young men clasped their hands tightly, their hearts united. Together they looked forward to a bright future where their clan would rise once more.